And then there have been other times where it's been direct. There was a time last year where our sacred geometry instructor, Nadi, she's also a crop circle enthusiast. So she was giving a couple of us a crop circle presentation. So we're just staring at these crop circles for, like an hour, which facilitates contact really easily if you want it. And that night, I had a dream where they came to me and they told me to watch Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, the movie.
Oh.
And if you remember that movie, it's about a young girl on the path of mastery.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Welcome to another show, Accentuating Positive with Karen Swain. Always beautiful to be with you all on this podcast show. Well, a bit of star family wisdom today with the gorgeous Jenna Layden. Welcome to the show, Jenna.
Thank you, Karen.
I'm excited to hear about your story. You're doing amazing things. And I'm just going to say to people, I wasn't going to say it, but I'm going to say subscribe. Will I say it? Nah, I won't say it. Let's get over the subscribe thing. People will subscribe if they want to subscribe. But if you are watching the show and you have subscribed, check if you're still subscribed, because I noticed quite a few people have unsubscribed lately. And I wonder, is it you or is it the platform? Anyway, the major platform. Let me tell you a little bit about Jenna and what we're going to talk about today. So Jenna Layden was a global vice president for Whole Foods markets and a former atheist who experienced contact with supernatural souls who guided her during her spiritual awakening. Through those experiences, Jenna began remembering lives off Earth and is now focused on her mission in this life to be a teacher of lost knowledge and wisdom from the stars. As an experiencer of supernatural phenomena and ET contact, Jenna has developed a passion for helping humans embrace a multidimensional reality without fear. Jenna has been initiated by the Four Winds Society, and I'm not sure if I'm going to say all this right, the Kuro lineage. How do you say that, Jenna?
The Karo lineage, yeah.
Karo lineage of Peruvian shamanism, is a certificate master energy medicine practitioner and has also been initiated into the ancient holy practices of Yeshua and the holy family of the Sri Kaleshwar and Sri Sai Baba divine lineage. Bit of a mouthful. We'll learn all about that. In early 2021, Jenna founded the Star Family Wisdom, a modern-day mystery school and community. She is also a member of the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma and is passionate advocate for the Indigenous communities and wisdom keepers who have been fierce protectors of humanity's original wisdom. Jenna has been leading teams and individuals through change and transformation for over 15 years. She's also got a podcast show, couple actually, we were just talking about it, called Star Family Wisdom Podcast Show on YouTube and Spotify. And you've just started Supernatural Souls podcast, which is on a separate channel, which is exploring that Indian lineage and the Yeshua lineage, which I'd love you to sort of inform us about today. So it says you're a former atheist. When did that change? What happened to change your mind?
Yeah, a lot's changed since then, obviously. So about, it was, I think about 5 or 6 years ago now, I was still at Whole Foods Market in my leadership positions, and I had a major supernatural experience happen. And it wasn't just one, it was a series of supernatural experiences that made me start to question everything about my reality and everything I had been told about what was possible and what was true. And I should say, I really just categorized myself as atheist because I didn't know what I was. I was so busy as a leader, as a young leader, for so many years at Whole Foods Market, that I didn't really have time to explore our spiritual, reality and what life is about and all of that. Although I always wondered, like, what are we doing here? Like, what is this? And so I had this major quantum entanglement psychic experience with another person. I then, in meditation one day, had a spontaneous past life recall. I saw 2 past lives so fast, so instantaneously, and was able to very quickly understand what I was seeing, what life that was, who I was in that life, who those other people were, and how it related to this life, and what I was going through, and what I was trying to process. And that was one of those moments that just catapulted me further in researching and learning about my soul and questioning, more about what's possible. I then started seeing the future and experienced that future vision playing out. And then one thing led to the next, and I started receiving messages from somewhere that were helpful. So all of this, it was happening in a really short period of time. And over the course of a year or two, while I was global vice president at Whole Foods Market, I spent every bit of free time I had starting to unravel this new version of reality that I was experiencing, and I started to experience guidance in these really extraordinary ways that ultimately led me to understanding I was experiencing some ET contact. So it was this very fast progression from being very closed off to spirituality, closed off to my higher, consciousness and my guidance, to then very quickly, very in a very profound way, having so many more clues about how reality works, who I am, what I'm here to do. And it also started to help explain why I had moved up in the organization of Whole Foods as a young leader at a fast pace. So I'm no longer atheist. I'm now very much committed, to this spiritual work, as you beautifully described in my bio. So it's been an interesting 5 or 6 years.
Couple of things. Why do you think you were an atheist to start with? Like, what was the thought process? And what did you see in the past life regression? I'd love to know. I'd love to know what you saw.
Yeah, great questions. I was raised by a family that was not spiritual, and my mother, although she was very open-minded, she taught me to be open-minded, which is what helped me as I started to have experiences. I was always taught to be willing to change my mind when presented with new evidence, and so she was atheist and declared, herself as an atheist. So I think I just took that on as a label for myself, because that's what she was. And I didn't have any connection to people in my life who were spiritual. So I didn't really know better. And then in the past life recall, this is not the only the only couple of past lives I've seen. I since, went on to do multiple regressions. I've, gone deep in the shamanic training, and in that work, we can access more memories. So I now have like a chronology of past lives I've accessed, but the first 2 were in relation to a person I had a relationship with, and this relationship had ended, and we were really in love, and it was just really, painful for both of us. And so I was asking questions, about that, and why was I experiencing such deep emotions and deep, darkness, around this experience. And the past lives I saw were related to this person, the person I was partnered with. And the first one was around World War II. He was dressed in military garb, and I was his wife. He was, and I knew all of this in a split second. It's like the whole story just unfolded, immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going to war. He left for war. I got left at home alone. He died and never came home. And so I had this abandonment wound in that life that carried over into this life, which is why when we parted ways and he left, it just cut so deep. It was replaying a wound that had happened in a past life. And the second vision I saw was of me as a young woman, a young girl at the time. And I don't know exactly when this would have been, but it felt kind of like the American Civil War era. Just based on the kind of one room building I was in. And it was, kind of a wooden kind of shack type of, building. And I was with a man. This man was my father in this past life. He was also dressed in what looked like Civil War uniform. And he was leaving to go to war. And I was being left back at the homestead. And he never came back either.
Wow.
So there were two right there that immediately told me, wow, this is just a wound, that was cracked open so that I could heal it. And this is also not the only life I've had, with this other person.
Wow. Yeah. Yes, I can relate. So I remember when I broke up with my first husband, or even before that, I remember as a teenager watching my friend's mother and father, and she had never worked, and she had to beg for every bit of money she ever got to shop. And I remember thinking as a teenager, I'm never going to be like that. I'm never going to be reliant on a man. I'm going to be independent. I want to make my own money. I don't want to be reliant on anybody. And then when I broke up with my first husband, I had this uncanny thought, you were supposed to look after me. Why didn't you look after me? You were supposed to look after me. So here's this independent young, because I'm still in my 20s, woman thinking, I don't want anyone to look after me. And then, so there was that karmic thing going on, there was some past life thing happening. But obviously it revealed a wound that you were still carrying over. How did you transmute that? How did you let it go?
So that's what led me to shamanic practice.
Okay.
So, I had been engaged in a lot of different, spiritual things, at that point, meditating and, dabbling in a lot of different aspects of practice. And, I should say that when these supernatural experiences started to happen and I started asking questions, all of a sudden, I would just stumble upon the right books, stumble upon the right information. I think a lot of people can relate to this. It's like you ask the question and all of a sudden you just start getting guided to what you need to connect with, for your soul. And I got guided to the Caro lineage of shamanism in Peru. And Alberto Violdo leads the Four Winds Society. He's a master shaman and spent decades training with these shamans who I think actually have some of the most well-preserved wisdom, shamanic wisdom on the planet. So I was very quickly guided to these practices, and on the Star Family Wisdom site, we've got some, beginner stuff if people are new to some of these practices and want to dip their toe in the water. Some of the aspects of shamanic practice are so simple and so beautiful, and in ceremony, in sacred space, we can do work to rewire the brain, rewrite soul contracts, rewrite the story, of what's happening. So the story, my soul was carrying was that I always get abandoned, and And so my job was to rewrite that story, that that's not the story in this lifetime. We're letting that go now. And so there were these aspects of shamanic practice that just helped me start to move through that. And this lineage of shamanism also has some really advanced initiatory practices that activate someone's energy field to be able to heighten our psychic abilities, heighten our perception, and access these realms of the past, and go into this work more. So I just went all the way. As soon as I got connected with this practice and saw that, yes, this is working, like this has a real effect of transmutation, and I'm transforming because of this. Then it became really clear that I was just supposed to take it all the way and utilize this technology. There's a medicine wheel technology. Many of the Native American tribes of North America also work with medicine wheels based on the 4 cardinal directions. The Incan civilization, their shamans utilized a very sophisticated medicine wheel technology. And when we utilize that, it guides us through the process of letting go of what we need to let go of, facing our fears, facing, death, reconciling that, finding the gifts of our soul, finding the path for our soul, and then ultimately getting to our destiny. So there's a really robust, practice within that lineage that ultimately helped me, heal that wound. And then, what I started to experience through that practice was accessing every other wound, that was there, all of the negative programming, like all of the stuff that, was holding me back, that gave me anxiety, all of the stuff that was painful, that had been suppressed. It helped me find that and transmute it. So it's a powerful practice.
Yeah, it's interesting that you went into the Eastern lineage to do that, when there's so many teachers in the Western lineage that do that.
Well, I should clarify really quickly. This Caro lineage is of Peru, and it was after going all the way with that lineage and getting certified as a master shamanic energy medicine practitioner, that then I went to the East and found or got connected with the spiritual technologies that Yeshua, Jesus Christ, used.
Yeah, because down here in Australia, we're quite close to India and Asia, and it's very big. It's very big, like the whole Eastern lineage down here. And I visited India with my husband at the time, who was a Hare Krishna, and I made a decision when I came back that I wanted to expand that same wisdom and understanding within the Western mind, that we didn't feel like we had to rely on those ancient Indian type practices or even shamanic practices to, do what you did, to let go of wounds and limiting ideas and conditioned thought forms that we're carrying. And like people like Joe Dispenza and lots of people, Bruce Lipton, lots of people are doing it in a kind of very scientific quantum type healing way. But you can do it any way that works, really. Anyway,
there are many paths.
Many paths. So how did the off-world, off-planet lives introduce themselves to you? Was it during that shamanic path that popped in?
Yes, it was kind of prior to that. I had gotten, so practiced in meditation that I could sit just completely still with my mind turned off, and that's how I had, accessed those first couple of past life memories. And it, it started by receiving these messages and receiving this guidance that was really clear. Like, it was very clear this was not my consciousness. And it was very clear I was being given like instructions sometimes. And this actually ties to Australia. This is kind of a fun story. So I was in Australia, up in Cairns, in 2019, at the end of 2019. And you know how when we're on the spiritual path, we're studying, we're reading all this stuff. And I had found my way to some UFO books, and I had found my way to different past life regression case studies, because I got interested in that after seeing the first past lives. So then I find these past life, or I guess I should say UFO abduction regression case studies. So I found one of those books, and I'm like fascinated by this concept. And all of a sudden and I'm reading this, before Australia, and then I take it to Australia with me to continue reading. But prior to Australia, I was reading this book. I start reading about someone having an ET contact experience, and I just burst into tears. Like, I had the biggest emotional release of my life. And it was so startling. And I knew enough about the science of the mind at that point and how emotions get suppressed and all of that to recognize like, something is trying to like come up. And I was like, oh God, have I been abducted? What's happening here? What is this? But I was nervous. So I just kind of put that down and, decided I would come back to that at some point. And meanwhile, I'm receiving these messages that are guiding me along this path, right? So I'm in Australia at the end of 2019. I'm by myself. I just wanted to do this trip by myself. I'd never been. Australia is so amazing. It's such a beautiful country. And so I'm up in Cairns, and it's on New Year's, and I'm doing some journaling about the next year. And I'm thinking, I'm starting to get this feeling like I'm supposed to leave Whole Foods at some point and do something with all of this that I'm learning, but I don't know what that is yet. And I'm setting goals for the next year, and I'm writing, and I'm thinking, am I supposed to leave Whole Foods in 2020? And all of a sudden I hear this message, no, your leadership will be needed there. Stay. And I was like, okay. A little, caught off guard, because at this point I'm still carrying fear, like I still have fear stuff that I'm needing to clear and get rid of. And so I'm like open to this guidance, but I don't know exactly where it's coming from, and I'm a little nervous. And so there was actually, and what I learned was a contact experience that happened in Australia on my way back. I didn't know exactly what this was until I went through my first regression in 2020. So I'm boarding the plane in Cairns to come home, and I pass out, and I'm like in the aisle of the plane, and I'm probably passed out for like an hour, and the plane doesn't get to leave. Yeah, it's like a big deal, like everyone on the plane gets delayed. I'm so sorry for everyone who was on that plane. And so I have this just major weird experience happen at the end of my trip in Australia. Well, fast forward to 2020, and I'm in meditation one day, and all of a sudden I have this, what is like a flashback to myself as a mantis being.
Ooh.
And I'm like, I'm in this body of this mantis being, and the arms, were like acting different than human arms. And it was very quick, it was just kind of this blip, in the meditation. And I'm like, what was that? And then there was one other thing that happened that ultimately got me to go through the regression, where I then learned more about, I got some of the beginning information about these other lives I've had, and these beings I'm connected with, and who was sending those messages. So are you familiar with Bashar?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people know Bashar now. So this was at the beginning of 2020, after the Australia incident, and I'm watching Daryl Anka's documentary First Contact. And this whole time, you know, since these experiences had started to happen, since the Australia trip, since that meditation, I'm just like questioning, you know, what is going on here? It's like more and more things are happening that are very different, you know, from what I had experienced all my life. And I'm watching Daryl Anka's movie First Contact, and I'm a little skeptical of channeling back then. You know, I'm still trying to figure out, you know, what's real, what's not real, you know, and I'm about halfway through the documentary, and I think, I don't know about this. I'm going to turn it off. I'm just gonna move on. You know what? I don't have time for this. But I'd ordered food for dinner that night for delivery to my house. As soon as I turned off the documentary, within seconds, I get a pop-up on my phone that says, your food has been delivered by Bashar.
That's
And I'm like, what is going on?
I love that. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so this whole time, like, I'm open, but I'm also a little fearful, and like I just don't know what to make of all this stuff. And then that happens, and I'm like, okay, Bashar, like, are you contacting me? What's happening here? So I finished watching the documentary, and you know, then I'm a believer, and you know, I'm opening up more, and it was that moment that got me to do the regression, because it made me laugh. You know, I realized, okay, I think I am having some aspect of contact. There's a lot of information that's starting to bubble up from inside of me, you know, from my soul. And it appears as though it's all benevolent. You know, it's like, it's nothing to be afraid of, I think. So I'm just going to go through with the regression and see what comes out.
What came out?
Well,
what came out of the regression?
I did a QHHT, and you know, in that process, you're usually guided to a couple of past lives first, and then the therapist will ask to speak directly to your subconscious or your higher self, and you can get, you know, some good answers to life questions and stuff. And so I had a list.
Like, why am I here?
Yeah. Who has been sending me messages? So I had this list of questions, you know, like, that I was excited to get answered. And so I saw a couple of Earth past lives first, which were really interesting, one in Egypt and one in Greece. And then the therapist, you know, goes into the part where he's asking to talk directly to my subconscious. And by this point, you know, I'm pretty deep, you know, in the state of hypnosis. And he starts asking some of the questions about, like, what happened in Australia. You know, she had been reading about ETs, and then this incident happened. You know, what were these messages about? Where were they coming from? And we got a lot of answers that what was happening in that Australia incident was some form of contact. The messages I had been receiving were from benevolent beings that my soul has had bonds with in other lifetimes, that I've been connected to. And that's what helped facilitate this kind of telepathic connection, you know, this entanglement that we have.
Mm-hmm.
We got answers about the previous civilization I came from, and the fact that that was on a ship. And so we're going through this series of questions and answers, and then all of a sudden, the answers that were coming out of me started to change. So so when you're in the QHHT style of regression and the therapist is talking to the subconscious, the answers that are coming out are, she or Jenna did X, Y, or Z, right? It's like coming from a different part of me. It's not my human personality responding. And so it's, you know, these answers coming from my subconscious, but then the answer switches to, we have always been watching and supporting. We blah blah blah, and all of a sudden this different consciousness took over and started to channel through me. And I share a little bit of this on the Star Family Wisdom YouTube channel because it's important to me to be transparent in all of this, and share openly if it's helpful for others. And so that was the beginning of starting to access more information, more specific information about those other lives. And then it was the shamanic practice of learning how to journey into the past and see, these other, aspects of myself, and start to just, gain a bigger picture, I guess, of what my soul has done and all of that.
A broader perspective. So
Yes.
did the we need to give themselves an identity, or were you just okay with we?
The therapist did not ask for a specific identity, like a name or anything like that, but they did say that they were family, they were soul family.
Star family.
Yep, star family. Yep. So they revealed that, like they revealed that they were not just like guides in the spirit realm. They were souls that I am part of, their family, and they happen to be on a ship, and they have always been watching me in this lifetime, because that was part of the contract in this lifetime, that I would grow up to access, more of this information, access my multidimensionality, and be able to just help, release some fear around these topics. And ultimately, I think, be one of those people that's helping with us all getting closer to disclosure,
Yeah, and helping others release the fear.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So when you said that your last incarnation or encounter was on a ship, when you first said that, because we'd gone into the past lives, I was thinking, a ship on the ocean, but you were talking about a ship in the sky.
Up there,
Yeah,
in space.
Yeah, a ship in space. And they've been overseeing all your lifetimes, right? The we.
Yeah, apparently that seems to be the case, that the Earth lifetimes, especially. And I got clarity that this we, while they didn't specifically like give a name or anything like that, it was the mantis beings. And we know that the mantis beings are to some degree part of the hybridization stuff, going on Earth. They are connected to the hybrid races. They're connected to Bashar's race of beings, and are assisting, overseeing, some of the scientific and spiritual aspects of that work. And so, yeah, it appears as though, I'm connected to that program. I'm connected to the mantis beings. And in my second regression, I got to see them, and I was regressed by Barbara Lamb to a recurring dream I had as a child. And I had this on the list of questions for the first therapist, the first time I got regressed. But for some reason, he forgot to ask that one question. The time just wasn't right. I know that now. I was so not ready for what I was going to experience. And so when Barbara regressed me, this was last year, she regressed me, and we went back to that recurring childhood dream. And I re-experienced myself having contact with a mantis being and a few gray beings.
Did you get a sense of the purpose, like what you were intending, what you were doing, why you were given the memory of that contact? Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
What
I think
significance does it have to you in this timeline?
Good question. So this kind of ties to, it's such an interesting connection to make, the ET topic, Yeshua's ancient holy practices, but it kind of ties to what I've ended up doing with Yeshua's ancient practices. The dream I had as a child was of a red rose in space. And I had this over and over for like 2 or 3 years. And And so by going back to that night of the dream and seeing this contact, and then also getting to witness myself on the ship with the mantis beings and have more of that experience integrate into my consciousness, it was one to release some of the trauma my human body, and mind had been carrying around that childhood experience. That would have been suppressed for over 30 years. And so I needed to get that, into my conscious awareness so that that was no longer a trauma that my human self was carrying. Two, I needed to have a better understanding of the race, I have been a part of, and who the mantis beings are. And it gave me this opportunity to kind of commune with them. Three, it helped explain the symbolism of the red rose. So the red rose was a screen memory for contact that had been occurring as a child. And then it was also symbolic. And ultimately, there was this series of synchronicities after that regression that led me to this path of Mary Magdalene study. There's a lot of symbology around the red rose and Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary and divinity. And so there was this wild series of synchronicities that led me to this Mary Magdalene path that then ultimately led me to connect with the information of this Indian saint, Sri Kaleshwar, who lived until 2012. He's no longer on the planet, but in his lifetime, he translated many of the ancient palm leaf manuscripts in India that hadn't been translated yet. And he found in them more evidence of Jesus's time in India and the ancient mantra and yantra systems that Jesus and a lot of other masters have used to activate their supernatural abilities and to transcend. And so there was this like incredible connection that happened from that, dream and contact experience that was basically telling me what I would be doing, what my ultimate path, in this kind of spiritual evolution would be.
Well, you've answered the question that I had on the tip of my tongue, which was great. What's the relationship between the ancient shamanism, the Indian wisdom, and the star family guidance? I think you've just answered it. That a lot of the wisdom teachings throughout the ages, all of the wisdom teachers throughout the ages were inspired by the star family wisdom, our star family brothers and sisters overseeing the evolution of this world. And so many of them, depict that, the Indigenous Australian First Nations and Australian talk about the star people, the Palladians and the Dogon tribe. And there's so many paintings of the star beings, from these ancient. And of course, Krishna was a blue being, Indian. He was blue. So there's a lot of connection between the stars and ancient knowledge and ancient wisdom.
Totally. And it seems as though I've been guided by star family to, at least for my community, help connect the dots on, these pockets of wisdom, pockets of technology. I like to, think of it as spiritual technology that if used the right way, really can activate, these like heightened, states of awareness, heightened supernatural abilities. And even though, there are so many cultures on earth and so many spiritual practices and ways in which we can, move towards enlightenment, there are a couple of pockets of really advanced technology we can engage as starseeds, as light workers, to go faster, to do this ascension and enlightenment work. And I can just say from, the process of saying yes to that and following through and engaging, some of these practices, wow, like I'd already had some supernatural experiences, but wow, like what's possible in terms of the peace and, bliss we can experience. And and the levels of, higher intelligence connection that we can experience. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, pretty intense and incredible. I always, just going back to Bashar, I've had Daryl on the show, and I said to Daryl when he was on the show, I had a different conversation with him. We didn't actually talk a lot about Bashar. I wanted to talk about his movies that he makes, because Daryl's really passionate about making movies, one of which was that First Contact that he made about his own story. Zeta, what's the name of his film company? Not Zeta.
I forget.
Anyway. Yeah. And I said to him when I first saw him channel, I couldn't, the frequency was too loud, too obnoxious. I'm like, I can't listen to that. And people were saying, listen to what he says. And I said, yeah, he's kind of saying the same thing as Abraham and Seth and all those teachers, but I couldn't listen to it. And then I saw an interview with Daryl as Daryl, and I related to the human. And as soon as I related to the human aspect of him, I could easily listen to Bashar. It was interesting. Yeah, it was interesting. But I always knew, let me say this, I always knew that Jesus was an alien, a higher conscious being that had incarnated into earth to teach humans about their powers of, about who they are, and, had come from different dimensions. And I didn't exactly know who that was or how that worked until I spoke to Samuel Chong. Have you heard of Samuel Chong, who is...
I've heard of him, but I'm not familiar with his work. So please, help connect the dots on this.
It's interesting that it's not his work, but he was called to continue the work. So there was this French-Australian guy called Michel de Marquet. He came from France and he settled near Cairns, and he had a nursery for many years. And he was taken by these 9-foot-tall hermaphroditic ETs to their planet, pronounced Tayuba or Thayuba. I don't know how to say it, and they showed him around their planet. They gave him the history of Earth. They showed him who Jesus was. They showed him the body of Jesus that they had manifested. And they gave him this huge story. They said, go back and write it in a book and tell humanity about it. So this is in the late 80s. And he did what he was told to do. And in the 90s, he, diligently tried to spread the message. And he was so ridiculed that eventually he ended up, he got divorced and ended up in Vietnam, married to a Vietnamese woman, and became reclusive and didn't want to talk to anyone ever again, because he had had so much ridicule saying that this was his true story. And people were like, you nuts, you crazy. And Samuel read the book and found him, and became friends with him and talked to him and went to see him in Vietnam. In fact, he did not know where he lived. He just knew what island he was on. So a very frugal young man, let me say that, frugal's being kind, bought a plane ticket and went to Vietnam to find someone. He didn't know where he lived, but he found him. And again, Michelle used to shoo people away because he was over it. Like he was just... But he shooed Samuel away, but eventually he let him in, and they became friends. And Michelle transitioned in 2018, and Samuel's taken up the mantle to spread the message of the books. And I'd love you to read the books, and I'd love to get your...
oh gosh, I have to now. Yes. I will definitely add that to my reading list.
Because the story is that Yeshua, and okay, before I get into the story, I want to ask you this question. What is your relationship with the one known as Jesus, Yeshua, that played out that biblical story that we all know so well? Did you have any insight into that?
Well, good question. In his time on Earth, Saint Sri Kaleshwar, the Indian saint who revealed these practices, he accessed past life memories with Jesus. And it was a result of their past life karma and commitment to each other that when the time was right, the practices would be revealed again and delivered to the world. And so, Saint Sri Kaleshwar talks about how his students, people who go to his ashram, people who go down the quote unquote divine lineage path, all had some sort of connection with Jesus, some sort of connection with that group, some sort of connection with the Essenes, the disciples, the people who were, part of his circle at the time. So yeah, it makes sense to me that given, what I'm doing now, and given this connection with Saint Sri Kleshwar and going to India multiple times this year, and having this, kind of strong calling, to go to India, there's part of me there that I need to connect with. And yeah, it makes sense that there'd be some connection there that's driving this. And I too have felt like, yeah, Jesus was a starseed, clearly all of the masters who have come to Earth were starseeds. Like they were souls who've already done this. They've already done the third dimensional experience. They've already mastered it. They've moved on. They've had all these other experiences, and then they just came back to help. It makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, if you think about it in who's teaching us, like if you're in kindergarten, you don't have one of the kindergarten teachers teach the kindergarten class. You have someone that's moved through kindergarten and school and university, and then they come to teach.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, same with the masters. They've moved through different experiences, and they've mastered it, and then they come back and say, let me show you how to do this.
Exactly.
so you don't suffer so much.
Exactly. And it also makes sense that in our dark ages, we're just now coming out of our dark ages, the masters couldn't really reveal what they knew about their souls. They couldn't say, hey, I just came from this ET civilization. Do you want to learn about it?
Yeah, maybe they did. I don't know, because
yeah, we don't know.
With the SSA First Nation people, they seem to be okay with it, that they came.
Yeah.
Like the Australian. I spoke to, what's his name?
Stephen Strong,
who said to me, don't call them Aboriginals. And I'm like, why? Because we always call our Indigenous Aboriginals. Everyone does. And he said that ab means not and original. It's like not the original. So it's an English,
yeah.
It's like to say they're not the original people. And that he said, I call them the original people, or the First Nation people, or the Indigenous. And I was like, wow, isn't that interesting? But yeah, so they talk happily about the Pleiades. Even if you go into the Red Center, they're painting the Pleiades and talking about the star people. They're happy to talk about it. But somewhere along our history, it became not okay to talk about aliens. And then probably in the last 100 years, there was like a deliberate campaign that if you did, you've got to be locked up. Yeah.
Which is partially why I'm doing what I'm doing now. It's like once I got clear on, once I got clear on that I have this ET connection, that I've done those lives, before, and all of that, and I'm this leader who's always walked my talk, that's been important to me, to be a leader of integrity. I could only be a leader of integrity if I did this. If I just held it all inside or just denied it, or didn't share it, when all of these other people are sharing openly and, willing to face what they need to face to just be able to live in their truth. Like I needed to be able to do that and support other people in that, and just add to the list of people who are raising their hand saying, hey, I've experienced something different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're talking about Jesus going to India and these lost scripts coming out that he was there. And there's so many stories like this. The story that we've been given about Jesus is he stayed where he was and he taught, and then they crucified him and so on. And then there are stories of, like Samuel points out, that there is a site for Jesus in Japan, and they celebrate every year, and you can put it into a search engine and you'll find it. They celebrate every year his birthday and his death day at this ancient shrine in Japan. And so many stories about him moving through Europe and moving through India. And so in the book, The Tide of Prophecy, it said that there were two Jesuses. There was the one born to Mary, whose DNA was tweaked by the overseeing ET, might have been the Mantids, who knows, tweaked his DNA so that he could have his abilities more online, to be in connection with his soul family, star family, and not be so much under the river of oblivion, they call it in the book, or the veil of forgetfulness. And he was the one that traveled the world learning and teaching, and died at a very old age in Japan at 90. And then there was the one that was completely, his body was completely manufactured by these masters who come from a 9th category planet. It's not density, it's category. It works differently. Who have complete dominion, control, mastery over manifestation. And they created a body. They said they had to create the body for him to be able to, at that time, so we're talking a couple of thousand years ago, do the miracles that he did.
Interesting.
Something that they, on their planet, it's kind of normal to them, walking on water, levitating, all this sort of stuff, manifesting instantly. It's normal for them. But for humans, it wasn't. But even the tweaked body of the first Jesus didn't have that ability to perform those acts, because it needed to be upgraded more. It might have been because of the times. I don't know. I'll have to reread the book.
Interesting.
So this was the one who came out of the desert, so to speak, at the age of 30 and started his ministry. And he was the one that was crucified on the cross, and they have his body in stasis. They took his body, and so he was the one that understood there's no such thing as death, and he could instantly heal himself at will. And
oh wow. Wow, this is so fascinating. I definitely need to read these stories and learn more.
When you find this information out, all the arguments about where Jesus was and who he was, and did he get married to Mary, and did he have children, like there's all these people arguing about who he was. It kind of makes sense that, like all of it happened, but it was a couple of different Jesuses, so to speak. Yeah.
There's also there's also like the Mandela effect. Have you heard of the Mandela effect?
Timelines.
It makes you think about that too, that like our ability to like really piece together history in like the most accurate way maybe is not actually possible sometimes because of these timeline shifts that happen. And maybe there's like these like different versions of the story because of that too. And
absolutely.
It's all fascinating. It's all fascinating to think about. And I should share it just, for your audience. This is like a one of those kind of, mind-blowing, things you talked about. At least, someone named Jesus was able to do these really miraculous things, and that defy the laws of nature as we know them. And in this lineage that Sri Kaleshwar brought forth, and in these practices, one can find themselves gaining those abilities, and there are these mantra systems for turning on those abilities. And in his lifetime, Saint Sri Kaleshwar, who I think it's documented in a lot of information about him, and a lot of his senior students know him very well. It appears as though he was one of the highest level like avatars who could come to earth, just like Jesus, because he was able to demonstrate some of those same miracles. And there's a lot of that documented, and people who can speak to those. And I think it's just kind of cool, like that's an understatement. It's important to know that that's happened in modern times. We hear about that having happened 2,000 years ago with Jesus, but we've got real examples of that happening more recently. And so Sri Kaleshwar talked about how his job was to create masters, and for these souls who are ready to go to those next levels, and carry carry that into, the new earth. Like this is the time, and that technology does exist on earth, whether it's aided or not. We've got the technology.
I see that he comes from the Shirdi Sai Baba lineage, but you don't mention Sai Baba, just Shirdi, who was the past incarnation of the Sai Baba, who was here in our times. There's this beautiful singer. Do you know Larissa Stowe?
Yeah.
So years ago, a girlfriend introduced me to her when we were traveling through the States, and I went and stayed with her and her daughter, who's, I think she's almost an adult now, young adult, teenager, was a little baby, a little toddler. And she had seen Sai Baba, and she had pointed to him and said, Shirdi, Shirdi, Shirdi. So this little toddler had recognized Sai Baba as the reincarnation of Shirdi Sai Baba. And when she saw a photograph of Shirdi Sai Baba, she was like all ecstatic. It's funny, as a young girl now, she doesn't remember that. But we were staying with her when Larissa was telling us that she had this memory. But yeah, so Sai Baba, when I was running a group here called the Academy of Light, the people that started it were big Sai Baba devotees. They said, got to go over and see him, but he was very old and sick at that stage. But he was doing all those manifesting vibhuti and jewelry, and I have friends that hold on to jewelry and stuff that said that was manifesting. Another Indian guru. I think it's so interesting that a lot of the masters come to places like India, because there's so many people in India, and India is so chaotic.
Oh my gosh, there's it's so big. So big.
There's another teacher called Amma, who's a man, but he says he holds the feminine energy in a male form, so he calls himself Amma. And he does all that sort of manifesting jewelry and stuff for you as well, like just sort of like, here you go, wear this. So yeah, people are doing it.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible.
But let me ask you, you said that Kaleshwar transitioned in 2012. How old was he? He looked quite young.
Yeah, I think he was only 39 at the time. Yeah, he was very young.
And did he say why he didn't stay longer?
He had completed his mission.
I think his mission.
Yeah, he had a big mission, to document and share as many of these mantra systems and practices as possible. And yeah, I think he completed that. And so then he took off.
Yeah, fair enough. Did he say that he would come back, or did he say where he was going or where he came from? Or
good question. I don't know. I'll ask that of some people that I have on the Supernatural Souls podcast, because that podcast is all about the divine lineage. And there are so many students who studied with him when he was alive and have these amazing stories of being with him and his teachings. So part of the intention of that podcast is to just share those stories so folks can find the lineage and learn more about him. So that's a good question, because there's a lot about him I don't know. So I'm excited to learn more. Yeah.
So you're going back to India soon?
I am. Yeah, I have a trip booked in October. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So I'll be going to Shirdi Sai Baba's samadhi. So Shirdi Sai Baba was Sri Kaleshwar's master.
Okay.
And guided him. And that's a fun story. Like Sri Kaleshwar was a teenager, I think, when Shirdi Sai Baba came to him from spirit.
Yeah, because I'm going to say he'd already transitioned by that stage. Yeah. Okay, came to him from spirit. Interesting that he appeared as Shirdi and not as Sai Baba. Maybe Sai Baba was still in form at that stage. Interesting.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Came to him in spirit, and what did he say to him?
There's this whole story about him showing up and saying, I'm your master and I want to guide you. And as a young boy, Sri Kaleshwar was kind of like, why are you here? Like, leave me alone. But started to follow the guidance, and it took him down this path of becoming a Swami, becoming a guru. And he just followed Shirdi Sai Baba's guidance the whole way. And Shirdi Sai Baba, produced a miracle for him to show him, that he was being led by, this master in spirit. And there's so much more to the story, but it's really cool to think about that this, this young boy was saying yes, to following this guidance. And he had already, at a young age been demonstrating, some supernatural abilities, but then, I think Shirdi Sai Baba was able to help him, go farther down that path and activate them all.
What I've noticed in India is that we do it in the West too, don't we? But when somebody comes out as some advanced being, they pop them on the pedestal and they guruize them, and then they give all the power to the guru, even though the guru is saying the power is with you. Yes, master, you. Like they, make them these gods. But just as I said that, I'm thinking we do that with our rock stars, our pop stars and our actors. And
it's so easy for humans to give their power over to other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One thing I love about, Saint Sri Kaleshwar, and I think, this is why I've been guided, to him as my guru, is because he really was like, I don't want to be on a pedestal. I don't want to be that person. I just want you guys to learn the knowledge and the practices, and I want you guys to become masters. And I think for anyone who looks into him and, maybe gets connected to the lineage, you'll find there is something different about him. And there's this camaraderie, between him and his students. And it feels different.
Has he come to you in spirit? Like, has he been a part of your downloads or?
Good question. I had, connected with his information. And as soon as I saw a photo of him, I had this strong knowing, this strong feeling like, I know you, I know this person. And then I started getting guided to India, but it was this subtle guidance. And I started suspecting, that he was guiding me, but it was very subtle. And it was like I was having to take the steps myself and, connect the dots myself on getting there and why I needed to be there. And as soon as I got there, I went to his ashram in April, and I didn't actually realize this at the time until I got there, but I went on Easter weekend, and I was there alone for Easter weekend, coincidentally. And I, spent all of this meditation time in the Shirdi Sai Baba temple. There's a Shirdi Sai Baba temple on the property, and then at Sri Kaleshwar's samadhi. So his bones are buried there. And for, someone who's reached these like really high levels of divine energies and supernatural energies, their bones are still like conductors of that. That's why people, pilgrimage to all these, places where saints are. And so, I'm having this meditation at his samadhi, and he started talking to me. Yeah. That was.
What did he say?
I won't share the details of that because it's personal, and it's something I'm still processing. But it was this incredible moment of just validation of why I was there, and that I was being guided to go, as far as I could, with these practices and this path, and it validated that I have known him, our souls are connected, and there is a reason for this in this lifetime. And so since then, I've definitely felt a stronger connection. Like that felt like the really like solidifying, I guess, of our connection in this life, and his ability to guide me from spirit now. So when someone connects with these powerful souls, you can start to receive direct messages from them.
Oh, beautiful. What about your galactic guides, like the Mantid? Yeah. What is their message to you? Have they given you any instruction like we would like you to do this, or are they just there gently guiding you as you come up with ideas? What about I do this, I start a podcast show, I do that, and they go, yep.
It's a little bit of both. I think there have been times, like in the first regression, I was guided to do this with Star Family Wisdom, and I was guided to start a modern day mystery school that was, integrating the ET side of things. And so that was pretty direct guidance I got, and then when it was time to leave Whole Foods, just like that Australia trip where I'm asking, is it time? And I got, this very clear, no, you need to stay. And by the way, the pandemic, started right after that. So I did need to stay. They were right. When the time came to leave Whole Foods, I was told to go. I was told it was time. And so I did. And then there've been other times where it's been direct. There was a time last year where our sacred geometry instructor, Nadi, she's also a crop circle enthusiast. So she was giving a couple of us a crop circle presentation. So we're just staring at these crop circles for, like an hour, which facilitates contact really easily if you want it. And that night, I had a dream where they came to me and they told me to watch Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, the movie.
Oh.
And if you remember that movie, it's about a young girl on the path of mastery and becoming a master and moving to the desert. I moved to the desert in Sedona, Arizona. And so I got guided to watch this movie to help me connect the dots on the next steps of my journey. So there've been these moments of very clear messages. And then there are times where I just sit at the computer and it just channels through me. So it's not like, Daryl Inca's style of channeling, although I've done a little bit of that in regression, states, or they've done it, they've taken over. Sometimes it's very integrated. It's like this, integration between my higher self, them, and it just flows through me, in what I'm creating and what I'm working on. And there are times where there might be these big ideas or moments of channeling that are happening, but then my human mind, my logical, side of me starts to question it.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe I'll get some guidance that, tells me, no, you do need to do that. So it's been a little bit of both. And, I think too, for folks who are interested in that or want that sort of contact and that guidance, it's become clear to me that, I have had to take all of the right steps myself. I have had to be willing to engage in my healing, be willing to face my fears, be willing to take those next steps myself. Like they're not going to do that for me, but when I hit these like forks in the road or these milestone moments, then, either they might come through unannounced, or unsolicited. Or sometimes I might say, okay, I need some help here, discerning, which way to go. And then that help is there.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask you a question about the younger generation, because I think you attract the younger generation because you're of the younger generation compared to my generation. What do you think they're needing? But I think you've just answered it. They're needing to overcome fear of moving forward, not only the fear of listening and connecting to their starseed lineage, but the fears that they carry from their DNA lineage as well.
Yeah. I talk a lot about that like we're here to become the new human, we're and in this transition of eras, we're cleaning up all the karma from this last era. Right. So when we transition eras, like it's just a cleanup job, we're completing everything we need to complete. And And yeah, we've got to reprogram ourselves from that limiting, lack-based, fear-based, paradigm we've been in to what's possible and to a more divine, experience. And I think, yeah, a lot of, the younger generation, the third wave, of volunteers, the star seeds, the light workers on this planet, like that's our mission. Our mission is like not to fight what's going on. It's not to, we're not going to change everything, that's going on. Like some of that's going to have to just break down, to change. But we're here to focus on our healing, to focus on sharing the wisdom, to focus on being wisdom keepers, so that as we transition this era, we're arriving in a higher place on the other side.
Yeah, beautiful. It's funny that you mentioned the third wave. I had a chat with Brian Rue yesterday for his show and Beyond Being Human, and he loves Susie Hansen. And so I was giving Susie Hansen's download that she received from the Greys when she was a kid of the third wave of volunteers, which is a little different to Dolores Cannon's third wave. I think it's a bit like Chinese whispers. You put a idea out there and everyone sort of has their interpretation of it.
Yeah.
It gets a little but yeah, and Susie talks about the third wavers as the initiators. Now, what did Brian call them? They're not necessarily the healers and the indigos, and they're the beings that are kind of below 50 in that they move into systems. They become doctors and lawyers and government in government and become part of systems, education system, government systems, all sorts of systems. And they're not into their personal growth or doing yoga or meditating so much. You would say that they were totally asleep and they're not really interested in it, but they're higher conscious beings. And then when the shift hits the fan, my words, as it has been happening in the last few years, they just wake up to knowing exactly why they're in that system, and they see ways to transform the system from that inside out. That's what Susie had called the third wavers.
That makes sense. That's similar to my experience at Whole Foods.
Yeah.
There were a lot of years, like I was not an awake person, but I was operating in a higher consciousness way, and I was able to affect, big change in the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. The food system's one of the most polluted systems on this planet. I mean, there's a documentary series on Netflix called Rotten that goes, it's like a 6-part, and it goes through all the food systems, and it's just crazy what goes on with our food. I mean,
I know. That's why we want to shop at stores that are transparent and have standards.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Exactly. Yeah. All the systems are up for review. There's a lot of work to do, darling, and you're doing an amazing job.
There's a lot. Yes. We're all doing a good job. We're all doing good.
And, as I talked to you, I knew that, it's so recent. Like you talk about 20, like last year, 2020, it's like just around the corner. It's so recent for you, this this awakening. And I feel like your initiative, the Star Family Wisdom, will become really big. So for people that are watching this, go over and share some love on Jenna's YouTube channels. Have you got it on other platforms as well?
Yeah, we're on Instagram and what else? TikTok. You can find us there. We also just launched apparel and merchandise. So for starseeds who are wanting to sport their starseedness,
their sacred geometry. I saw that.
We've got all sorts of cool
but have
shirts and stuff.
Are they on any other sort of video platforms? Have you got it on other platforms?
We were on Conscious Awakening Network for a bit. I'm not sure if some of our videos are still there. I've been on Portal to Ascension a number of times. You can find some talks there as well. And then Meditation Conversation podcast by Kara Goodwin. You can find some content with me there. And we actually host her 21-day meditation immersion course too with Star Family Wisdom.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, it's been absolutely fascinating, honey one, to hear your story. I just was riveted. I loved it. And you shared it so well. It's just been beautiful to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And thank you to your audience and everyone who's doing this work. Like, it's so, so important. We're doing a good job.
What a beautiful conversation with Jenna. Love her. I didn't know much about Jenna. I'd seen her a couple of times. She had done some stuff with Michael Nace Beyond Being Human, and I'd seen her through Sheila and the Conscious Awakening Network. I think she'd even spoken on Cosmic Conversations, but I felt like I needed to connect with her and reach out. And I didn't realize that her awakening and all this stuff was so recent. Yeah, so that I was amazed to hear her story and how recent it all is, and who she's working with. And yeah, it was great to connect. It was wonderful to connect and talk about that ancient lineage, the Indian lineage. And yeah, fascinating how it all dovetails, isn't it? For decades, millennia, thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, our star family have been overseeing the evolution of consciousness and the DNA of this world. I don't even know if it's the evolution, because I think that we have to be pretty masterful beings to take on a human experience, knowing the level of oblivion that we will experience while incarnated. But we have these masterful oversouls, teachers that are guiding us as we fall around on this planet, getting caught up with hatred and resentment. And, we forget who we are as spiritual, infinitely creative extensions of the source. Yeah, so it's a pretty masterful soul who comes to this, what we call kindergarten or level 1, category 1 environment. We have to, it's not easy. It's not easy. You've got to be quite masterful to be here, I think. But we have these beings that have mastered this environment that are, guiding us as we attempt to master this environment and what it is to be human. Yeah, it was fascinating hearing about her connection with the Mantids, because Brian and I were just talking about that on his show that we did for Michael's Beyond Being Human, and also for his BitChute show. I don't even know the name of his show. What does he call his show on BitChute? Have I got it up? No, I haven't got it up. But that was a great conversation I had with Brian this week, which I've also uploaded on my channel. If you want to go and see us having a talk. He was interviewing me, but I like to talk to everybody, so I like to hear what he has to say. I'll get him on the show to talk more about his experiences. And I put all his links and the Beyond Being Human links under the show on YouTube if you want to check that out and support his show as well. Beautiful. So this weekend, I've said on a couple of podcasts, we have Don Hudnall in the Inner Sanctum. Don is an amazing being here on planet Earth doing incredible things. He's going to share some of his stories. So if you want to join us in the Inner Sanctum, please do so. Just go to karenswain.com/inner sanctum, pop your email in there, and you'll receive the emails with the Zoom links if you want to meet the tribe and meet the different speakers that I have each month. I invite one guest teacher a month to come and share their story. I feel like I should do it more, but I used to do it more. I used to do 2 a month, but it is on my weekends, my Sundays, which is a Saturday afternoon for you guys, and it's kind of nice to free up a couple of weekends. I'm actually going away the day before and driving back, so it'll be a 5-hour drive the day before to go and celebrate somebody's 50th birthday. People are staying the night, but because I've got the group, I'm driving back the same day. So yeah, that's what happens. So come and support us. I put them out free or by donation, so there's no obligation. That I'm happy for you to join and meet other people and, get connected and hear people's stories. And I always put on a little chat group, catch-up group at the first weekend of the month. So join us in the Inner Sanctum. And thanks again for listening and watching and subscribing and sharing the shows. And I'll catch you next time. Remember to check out the book, Awakened by Death, if you haven't already. And I'll see you soon. Bye for now.